Yeah. I'm gonna buy that one and that one. All of it. I need it all. Do you want it though? Where do I begin? I see the hate, they don't wanna see me win. Bank deposits, I got more coming in. Top down, throw the money in the wind. I don't.
Hey guys, thank you for joining us for our last Educators Roundtable for 2021. We've been really focused on looking at education equity. Education equity is something that hits so many areas across what it is that we call education. We have charter schools, we have public schools, and we have private schools. And we have an array of other educational resources and support organizations. So when you look at education overall, you think about urban, suburban, and rural. Of course, the rules are all the same because they give us the same education platform or concepts. We also have the same, laws, or do we? Do we have the same funding or do we? Are there other circumstances that may impact education equity and how we manage education for our students in urban, suburban, or rural? So let's get this show started because it's always great to have my co-host on board. Hey, Shannon, how are you?
Doing well, Burkett. How are you?
As always, I'm so happy to see you. So listen, I just want to say, New York, you guys have been in and out of the news. What's up? You guys have been like hot, too hot.
There's a lot going on in New York right now. A lot going on. New mayor incoming January 1st, new chancellor, new police commissioner, female for the first time in history.
Congratulations on that one. I was really excited.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, New York's going to look a little different at the start of the year, for sure.
I'm loving it. Okay, so listen, I want to say that we have a couple of guests, but our guest is going to join us for our first half. I'm really excited, and not because she's my cousin. It has nothing to do with that. I think Dr. Mason has gone through education for the past 30 years. And when you talk about a person who started at grassroots, looking at how she can change the scope of how education is done in urban education. She then extended herself out to charter schools and also to suburban, and she then decided to start her own practice. So I'm going to say to you, we not only have a rock star, we have somebody who's truly a game changer. She has worked in Detroit Public Schools as a CEO and Superintendent of Excellent Awards and received numerous accolades for her work in leadership. I want to say to you, the National Alliance of Public Charter Schools in Washington, D.C., she was honored by them. And also that happened in March of 2019. And she was selected as one of the 25 nationwide innovative public school leaders in the National Alliance of Public School conferences in Washington, D.C. I see my hat goes off. And again, not because she's family, because she's truly a rock star in education. Dr. Mason, thank you for joining us on the Educators Roundtable. This is like having royalty sitting up in this time. I'm like really excited because we're going to really get down to what's happening in the minds of our students today. How are you?
Good evening, and I'm very happy and pleased to be with you both. I am so excited to be a part of this presentation and this panel today.
I'm excited. So, Shannon and I have talked since we started this podcast. We had on Paula Lightsey, who touched on socio-emotional and talked about the different opportunities for students and resources and tools. But what you do is even a deeper dive. And you've actually seen firsthand whether or not we look at education through the same lens. So before we get going in this conversation, one of the things that we want to do is we want to get everyone's understanding or definition. Of course, they've heard Shannon's definition and my definition, but we want to kind of get your perspective of how would you define education equity from your lens and what you do?
Education equity involves making sure that all learners has access to a great education and doing all that we can to make that happen. It's an ongoing process that has to be done through the years in a continuous process.
I love that. So we talked about on our part 3, I love the concept that Dr. Kelly brought in when she said, there's 3 or 4 kids at the fence and they all want to see over the fence, but they're all at different levels. So the boxes that they need to see over the fence are all going to be different. I love that analogy. And after this podcast, I'm actually going to post that picture up so people can take a look at what she was describing. But that's where we're at right now in education. I mean, we have so many kids who are in the classrooms, but they're all at different levels. So, Shannon, we talk about education equity. What does it look like for you?
I can echo completely what Dr. Mason has shared. It's absolutely ensuring that every learner, but it also ensures that every teacher, every leader, as we begin to build the capacity of the people doing the work, we have to consider the most pivotal roles, and that's the classroom teacher, ensuring that they have the resources, the training, the supports that they need in order to get the work done, and the leaders to ensure that they are correctly prioritizing the vision and ensuring that they're creating the conditions that make it possible for every student to learn. For example, a principal has the ability to manipulate a schedule that will allow for potentially professional learning communities to take place, extended learning opportunities within classrooms, block scheduling, things like that. So I think when I think about educational equity, I think about ensuring that all of the resources, the supports, the curricular resources and materials are in place to ensure that every learner, and that's going to be different as well. So we didn't say equal, we said equitable. And a lot of people tend to confuse the two.
I like that. And I definitely agree with both of what both of you are saying. I think a lot of times in education, one of the areas that we definitely overlook is our students who are in special needs, or students who have additional needs outside of the norm. And it takes a lot more to create equity for them than it does for a regular student. So, and the thing is, I'm not a special education teacher, but being in science, I've actually worked with a lot of students who were in special education, especially my autistic kids. Those kids, a lot of times, are above grade level in content comprehension. So when you think that they have special needs, their needs may be social, but it may not be intellectual, right? And that's one of the things I love with working with them. And I always tell, when I was working as a science teacher in chemistry, biology, and several other areas in science, I would say to them, no, send them to the class. I want to work with them, because they made me work harder as a teacher to make sure that my instruction was on point, right? And I like that. So thank you so much for sharing that. So when we look at from the perspective of what it is that we're doing, and I just want to say, we have viewers that come on, and I like to say hello. Yvette, thank you so much for joining us. She's in Texas. She's actually from Detroit, but she's been in Texas now, I think, for the past 10 or 12 years. So thank you so much for joining us. I also want to thank one of our viewers, Thomas K. I agree. I think that you have to address the disparities, then make sure that the resources are shared equally. 100%. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. Is one of the things that we do.
I'm so sorry, Burkett.
Yes.
Resources should not be shared equally.
Why shouldn't resources be shared equally?
Because there are those that have greater needs than others.
Well, explain. Like, what? I mean, what is that? Well, right now we are sharing them equally. They think we are.
Let's go back. Let's go back to that caption. If all kids get one box, then you're still going to have some kids that can't see over the fence. Then you're going to have some kids that are seeing way over the fence because they're much higher than the fence because they're taller kids. I say that to say that all kids should get what they need. And I definitely want to, and you know what? In certain communities, there are needs for greater resources, greater curricular resources because they're not in the home, greater training for staff and leadership because they have a great deal more work to do with those students coming in. And the students are not the problem, ever. It's our ability to move those students to where they need to go. So I definitely, I don't think that the resources should be equitably divvied up. I think that folks should be equally divvied up. I think folks should get what they need.
Folks, so Dr. Mason, what do you think about that?
Well, what comes to my mind, I'm thinking about equity access again. And so right now we're on a quest to be what our students need us to be, and that means that we have to take a look and listen to what they're communicating to us and what they are saying. And that includes the administrators, the principals, the school district, the teachers, in terms of making sure that we're putting the resources where it is needed. So I kind of agree with him. When you have resources, you have to take a look at where it is needed and making sure it's a good fit for the students that you're working with and the school district and the community.
Okay, and that's another element we're going to jump into when we talk about the community and the support resources that are provided to whether or not it's urban, suburban, rural, and whether or not it's a public, a charter, or private. And that's like the different dynamics. So I want to say Yvette also agrees with you, Mr. Smith. Equity and equality is so different. And that's great that we understand that. But the thing is, how do we execute that? So, Dr. Mason, when we talk about the leaders in our school district, and Shannon and I often talk about this because both of us are previous leaders in school districts that we manage, and our perspective and how we did things are very, very similar. So when we look at what we need to do, we did things based on the needs of the kids, right? And we did things based on, we actually sat down and met and talked to the kids. We did those. We were very personable with our kids. Maybe most leaders may not be, but we have a different approach to things. We actually get to know them. But what's your perspective when a lot of school leaders are doing exactly what they're told, in the sense of, I'm providing this class with the same information as this fourth grade class, although the tests have proven, the NWA test scores have proven that this fourth grade class is behind. But you're going to give them both the same resources, same financial support, everything. They don't get a special aid. The other class doesn't get anything different. What do you think about those decisions when leaders do that?
I think leaders have to be a disruptor. We cannot do the same thing that we've always done. We have to change the paradigm in terms of how we move forward. And this can be done starting in the teacher's classroom. They can disrupt and develop their own culture and their climate that's needed. But it also means working in partnership with the school board. That's one of the reasons why I'm currently serving as a school board member, to ensure that the monies that have been allocated through the CARE Act is allocated to the students and the teachers and the community that is needed. And that's very important, that with whatever your leadership ability, whether you're on a school board, whether you're a teacher leader, whether you're a school administrator, if you are a stakeholder, we all play a role in terms of making this thing happen and dealing with the change of the student learning that's been lost during this pandemic.
That, what you said, is a true game changer. I'm wondering how many leaders actually look at the test scores to assess what is truly needed by student, by classroom, instead of overall making an overarching decision on how to allocate resources or funds. And the reason why I say that is that the NWA test scores, especially in the state of Michigan, tells you exactly what areas students are deficient in. So right now, when you said about cohorts, that's one of the things that I've always looked at, is that you're supposed to use that to create cohort learning groups for your students so that you can offer that additional assistance. So right now in this virtual platform, one of the things that we're lacking, and just to give you some additional information, New York is just face-to-face. They don't offer virtual. So they're in a different world than the rest of us, the ones who are doing hybrid and some other things. So the things that we're looking at doing as far as education, they don't have that. And by the way, viewers, you guys are free to ask questions if you would like to of any of us. And you can also pose questions that you would like to address the panel with, and we will answer them for you. So one of the things that concerns me is that, what do you think about how leaders are making decisions without looking at the data? I think a lot of things that should be data driven, and then we'll get back to how boards support educational resources.
When they're looking at the data, one of the things that's very important is not just to look at the deficits, but take a look at the strengths of where our children are. It's so key to flip the script in terms of, instead of telling the children about, you've lost a lot of learning, you need to tell the children in terms of what you're doing good now and where we're going to go in, and getting them to buy in to travel along the road with you. We got to change the mindset of the teachers in the classroom. We got to change the mindset of the parents and all the other stakeholders involved in terms of how we move forward with the children. Now, again, tests like the NWA is designed for a specific purpose. But that should not be the main thing that we're using to assess the learning for children. We got to be creative. You can't just use the same old state standardized test to say, oh, we got a big gap and teachers go back and teach to the test. So we got to pass this test. We got to blow that stuff up. That's got to be blown up, and we got to do something different.
Dr. Mason, I cannot tell you, if I had an applaud sound effect, I would play this for you now. That is one of the things that I feel that has impacted us the most in a negative way. And one of the things that Shannon and I, we talked about it. One of the things that I've been researching and working on is how to create a assessment that will look at not only just the data from that, but all data, but look at specifically what the student is doing and provide them with the indicator, specifically what is missing. They may not be missing all of third grade reading. They may be missing certain things and understanding and comprehending at a third grade level. Those are definitely a very different. And so, oh, that's Kay. Hey, Kay, I forgot that was Kay Thomas who joined us. I'm sorry. I like to make sure I put in. Texas is also in person. They're not doing any virtual hybrid. Texas, you guys are definitely just, on top of the game over there. You guys are with New York. You're like trailblazers. Kay, thank you so much for joining. So I would agree. However, I think resources are allocated in a way that keeps lower performing districts where they are. What do you guys think about that?
I would agree. I agree on a couple of different levels.
Okay.
I think when you start looking at the foundation allowance that schools are allocated, while that's all kind of pretty equal, I think of resources from the human resources perspective, and I look at who's applying to, hired by, and employed by the most needy schools that we have. And ultimately, those are, most first year, second year teachers using that opportunity as potentially a stepping stone to get into another district. They're oftentimes very transient places. So when I think about resources, I really think about the human resources piece, and they're the least trained of the teachers as well. And so I agree with Thomas. Is it K Thomas?
It's Thomas K.
Thomas K. I definitely agree. But I think that building the capacity of those that are closest to the work is the most important work that can be done. And I agree with Dr. Mason when she talked about leaders being disruptors and really, because, okay, let's just be real. Life has been disrupted for the past almost 2 years.
Yeah. And
we are clinging to an old way of thinking and an old way of doing business that we need to let go of. And we can rethink this thing completely. We are poised for some whatever comes next greatness. And I think we should think of it as an opportunity.
Okay, before we go to break, I just want to thank Yvette for watching. She applauded what we were saying in our last comment, and thank you for the positive feedback. So guys, as always, we want to take a look at what it is that we do in education, but we also want to look at how can we improve it. When we come back, we're going to get into what resources and tools are out there and get into the specifics of how we can integrate this from the top down. We're talking about the boards to the principals, to our school leaders, curriculum developers, to our teachers, and into the classroom.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome back to the first half of our show. If you're joining us late, what we're talking about is education equity. And we're talking about how that impacts urban, suburban, and rural education. So welcome back, Shannon, my co-host. And welcome back, Dr. Mason. So listen, I want to get into a deep dive. I want us to really get into what you had shared with us as it relates to how do we integrate. I think we look at boards, a lot of school boards are not as, how can I say, intuitive, maybe as your school board. Am I saying that nicely? I'm trying to say it nicely. They're not as intuitive as you, but not only that, there's a difference in their interaction that a charter school board provides versus a public school and a private school. So when we say this, folks, I want us to all be clear that they operate a little bit differently. So take a broader perspective on what we're about to share with you, so you can gain a little bit more clarity. But of course, a lot of what we're saying can be integrated. So, by the way, before we get started, um, Judge Leona Lloyd said, "Good point, Dr. Mason," on the last comment you made before we went to commercial. And thank you for joining us, Dr. Leona. So, Dr. Mason, when we look at education, what is your perspective on how we can start looking at from a board perspective down, begin to make the right decisions to make sure we're supporting education equity?
Relationships, relationships, relationships are key and critical in terms of nurturing and showing unconditional love for our students. And then building upon that, having teachers that genuinely care and love children makes a big difference in terms of helping us to move forward and helping the students to learn what it is that they need to do. So we have to take time in terms of identifying quality people who meet those goals and who want to be a part of this particular change that needed to be done. You have to also involve the stakeholders in the community. In terms of with the loss that has been done in terms of academic learning, one of the things that is a major outcome of this pandemic, and
I think we have a slight delay with Dr. Mason.
in terms of working with these children, to this day, we have 800,000 people who have died, close to maybe 1 million here in the United States. Our children are hurting, okay? They are hurting. They've gone through all kind of trauma. We have to deal with those barriers and put things in place that will help those children, help those families be in a position to help their children to learn and to grow. We got children going through stress, children going through anxiety, children during the pandemic that there's been an increase of homelessness. There has been an increase of domestic violence. I see it in my practice every day in terms of the number of referrals that I'm getting from protective services where families have been torn apart as a result of the pandemic and not having enough resources that's available to assist. So dealing with and making sure that we have more social, emotional resources for the schools and for the communities as we move forward is critical, as well as putting those things in place for academic success.
Okay, I'm going to say that was the second half of our show, but we're going to dive into it right now, which is social emotional. We're going to do it because like you opened the door, but I'm going to take one step back before we go there. And I'm going to say, Shannon, what's your perspective on the feedback that Dr. Mason shared with us in relation to how we're not supporting students with their personal, social, emotional issues or concerns due to the impact of all these changes that have occurred? I'm going to tell you, I know a lot of students who kind of went through a panic attack because they couldn't see their friends. They literally went through it because that was their life source, right? Their friends. Maybe their home life wasn't so great, but going to school was ideal for them. That was a break from their reality, but they didn't have that. And you're seeing that in a lot of situations where kids are logging on and parents are walking around half nude because that's their real life at home, right? It's a little weird for them. So now kids are really embarrassed because of what's happening in their real space. So what's your feedback on that? And how has that impacted your district? You guys are face to face though.
I think when you squeeze lemons, you get lemon juice, right? When you press apples, the juice comes spilling out. Whenever you put pressure on a person or a system or a structure, what's inside comes out. And I think that all of the challenges that we're seeing as a result of our current circumstance are a direct kind of reflection of challenges that they've always been there. We can just see them more clearly now. And I think that even when you think about the impacts of the pandemic on communities of color, how they've been disproportionately impacted financially as it relates to death rates, even when you think about communities that really struggle socioeconomically. Like you can really see all of the pressures that this pandemic has put on all of those systems, and all of the challenges have really made the weaknesses in the system much more clear. And just to be clear, I don't think schools generally do a very good job of meeting the needs of individual schools, students as is. And they haven't, not historically so. And I think even more so, the need is in place, but it's something that I don't know that all schools, for the most part, have prioritized.
Okay, that's a clear perspective. So I'm going to say overall, when you look at what it is that we're doing in education, we're talking about from a board down. One of the things, and I totally agree with you, Dr. Mason, that they need to take more consideration how we support not only our students but our staff. The loss across all education levels has been huge as it relates to loss. I know 2 school districts who lost at least 2 to 3 teachers and students due to this. So when you think about that, are we offering the tools and resources they need to recover from that, to then focus on this major test or this assignment or content comprehension or achieving that academic goal or being more sociable as we are online right now? So when we talk about social emotional, because we're going to jump into that, that was actually the second half, but Dr. Mason, you brought it in. So we're going to go ahead with this. I need to know specifically when we talk about social emotional, and some of our people may not be aware of that. When we talk about that, what is 1 or 2 things you would like to see school districts integrate into their curriculum or processes that would support that?
So when we talk about social emotional, we're talking about the children learning, or even teachers learning, how to manage your emotions, set goals, show empathy for others, establish a positive relationship, and be able to make responsible decisions. During the pandemic, our students lost a lot. They couldn't play football, that was closed down. The recreational centers were closed down. All the other avenues, Boys and Girls Club was closed down, where they could see other adults and other children to home into those skills. It went amiss during the early part of the pandemic. And so it's important to kind of partner with resources in the community, and those people who are in a position of leadership do some things with that. Case in point, I've served as a licensing consultant for the state of Michigan Department of Regulatory Services that licenses children group home, adolescent group homes, and children camp. One of the things in talking with some of the directors at the YMCA who are licensed for children, they were operating during the summer, during the first part of 2020. And as the summer camp programs ended, schools did not return to traditional learning. And so some things had to be done. So one of the things that I talked about with the YMCA is, why can't we pivot and provide resources for family? Since you're already licensed as a day camp or residential camp, can you provide online support services for those families who need care during the academic year? So as a result of having that conversation, the YMCA came on board, and they had all their day camps in the urban areas become satellite centers to provide support service for families and children in the online learning environment. They further have 2 major camps that are in rural areas up in the Upper Peninsula and also in the west side of the state. In the rural areas, those facilities became homes for people in that community whose schools were closed, where they were able to provide support and teaching and learning, and also still engaged in some of those recreational things that was missing during the pandemic. So those are some of the things that I recommend that people can do. For example, the state of Michigan had the Eat Up and Meet Up programs that provide food, breakfasts for families during the summer. Many of those programs were also licensed as a day camp. Many of those programs were at local churches. Through collaboration with stakeholders, we were able to get those groups to pivot to provide those recreational resources that were missing to engage the children and the parents to be able to reconnect with those things were very important. So doing those kinds of things and working with your partners who already have things in place can help the schools and help the community recover and begin to heal during this pandemic that we're going through.
What is something that charter schools can do right now? And thank you for that. What is something that charter schools can do right now? Who can they reach out to in order to get that additional support? But before we move forward, let me share with you. Kay says create community partnerships and access for all, not just stakeholders and management companies.
That's so true. That's so true.
So I mean, so when they say that, what are they saying that we're missing? What is Kay saying that we're missing at this point in relation to that?
There's a strong need from what I've learned and what I see, going back to mental health services. You know, during the pandemic, there was a 23% increase of children going into the emergency centers and the emergency hospitals because they were dealing with mental health challenges. And so, again, tapping state resources and money that was allocated by Governor Whitmer, we were able to get satellite telehealth services to those children and to those families that were in need in real time once that money was released. And so it's very important to be able to talk with your legislature, have connections with your governor and all the other Board of Education people who can put pressure to put the money where it is needed in terms of helping those children and those families deal with the homelessness that they were experiencing, dealing with the domestic violence that was going on because everybody's home and getting on everybody's nerve. And not to mention the physical and sexual abuse that really went awry because the reporting process was drastically affected because those mandated reporters were no longer in the schools. They were at home. And so we had a lot of children suffering continuously because those things were not in place. That's why we have to partner with agencies and other private foundations to provide additional money to support that social, emotional connections and help the schools and be a partner.
That is major. Shannon, I know you guys, and thank you, Dr. Mason. I know you guys suffered the same thing because of the population. You guys have one of the largest homeless populations for students in the country, and you guys have still successfully been able to support them throughout this COVID transition. I mean, how is that working in relation to providing them with the additional resources they may need, and kids who may now be going back into the system who potentially were not a part of that homeless due to sexual assault or something that happened in the home and they have to be placed in another care?
I think the organization is asking different questions of itself at this time. And the questions that the organization is asking itself is, how can we support students through this trauma? How can we leverage high value practices such as restorative practices to promote healing, community voice? How can we attend to mental health? I think that for the first time in a very long time on a large scale, school districts and organizations are asking themselves those questions. And concretely, they're really putting the student at the center of the process, looking at their needs, thinking about how can we support students concretely with positive identity development? How can we support them in the processing of these emotional responses to the trauma that they face? How can we help them? And this is in response to all of the social unrest that we've seen over the past year. How can we help them think critically about power, about social justice, about oppression? And how can we engage them in critical conversations around race and racism. So I think that New York, it has adopted a framework that has really addressed that really handily. But I want to say to Dr. Mason, and I want to go back to a point that you made. School boards have an absolutely and what's interesting is you see school board meetings have become so much more contentious and public as of late. First off, most of these folks don't get paid. They are just public servants who do it for a lot of different reasons, but ultimately, most folks want to see schools and school districts thrive. So thank you for your service with respect to that. But if you are a school board member and you're listening, school boards set policy. School boards work with school communities to set the vision. School boards set the district priorities and budget. Like, those are huge decisions. So if you're a school board member, you have one of the most important jobs in really supporting the work on a governance level in moving forward.
And Shannon, that's one of the things I think a lot of people are missing. When I served on school boards, I usually serve in the capacity of treasurer. And I have no idea why, but maybe they figured with her background, she knows numbers. And I do. I'm very finite when it comes to your budgeting and how you allocate your funds. And so in that role, it was much larger than what I anticipated. Because to your point, I wasn't being paid, but I was required to be accessible to sign checks and to sign off on things quite often, especially in charter schools. But I'm going to say to you right now, what I'm finding, specifically in charter schools, their boards have a lot of people who have no education background. They're coming from different areas of industry. And I think a lot of things are being overlooked because of that. So when you have someone that's coming from a business background, not understanding how education works, it's hard for you to listen to all the concerns we have around curriculum and assessment, social emotional outreach, support services, when you've never come from that world. So I think that we need to do a better job with making sure we have the right people in the seats when it comes to board governance to make sure what's happening in the classroom is happening. I like a good mix. I'm going to tell you, I do like a good mix. But right now, some charter schools are self-managing and no one knows how to self-manage.
Agree.
And they're falling apart.
Yes.
But it's also outside of the context of the charter world, an elected position. Anyone can run.
Exactly.
I think one of the things that we need to do is, and I've done a lot of this work, is really work diligently with school boards to build their capacity and understanding their role, right? And understanding kind of, why are you here? And really hammering in on the fact that they don't work at the school or in the district, right? Like managing the day-to-day operations is the responsibility of the person. For the most part, that's their only employee, and that's either the superintendent or whomever it is that reports to the board. That having been said, teaching them about accountability and how to really look at data in a way that informs their decision making, along with the financial decisions, because I think great school boards ask really tough questions, right? And they ensure that the management company, the superintendent, whoever it is that's reporting to them, is moving the needle forward. But they got to ask the right questions. But it's all about training and support for those folks as well, just like it is for teachers, leaders, and students.
I agree 100%. And Thomas K says, let's address the elephant in the room. Education is a big business, and we don't see social programs in underrepresented districts because it doesn't support the bottom line. What do you guys think about that?
I would say that's very true. I've seen that. Okay. I've seen that. And
Thomas K, you're getting a lot of home runs over here.
In that, with them not having the same financial structure as traditional public schools, many of them are lacking the additional funding that's necessary in terms of to provide those supports that we're speaking of. And this is why it's very important that you have a financial team that's into fundraising to write grants and tap into these foundations that can bring you some of the additional resources and staffing that you need to do what you need to do for your school community.
I agree with that. So, guys, we need to go to a quick commercial break. And as soon as we come back, we're going to finish up this conversation with 2 comments from our viewers. Again, thank you so much for watching us here at the Educators Roundtable. The purpose of this platform is to provide educators and non educators a voice into what's happening right now in our education. So, thanks again for watching us here at Educators Roundtable. Okay, guys, we're back. And so, where we left off in this section of our programming is that we were specifically talking about the roles that charter school boards play, or any board plays, in decision making and governance. So Trisha chimed in and she said, I just joined. I'm not sure if our parent communities understand how we lift their work, how we lift their voices to the school board in order to promote change. I've expressed numerous times to parents that they have the power. Although they have the power, they feel useless in many cases. Educating parents by empowering them to have their voices heard is an obstacle we must overcome in the inner city. What do you guys? I'm going to tell you, because parent teacher conference, we have to almost pay parents to show up in the inner city, right? And I'm sure rural and suburban may not be going through that, but when it comes to board meetings, we see just the numbers aren't there. Even now virtually, now that we're doing virtual, you would think they would just hit the link and join the conversation. So, Dr. Mason, we'll start with you. What do you think about that?
I think that goes to the heart of parent academies in
Mhm.
terms of teaching them how to feel involved and empowered, and teaching them that you do have a voice. And this is how you can affect change, by using your voice. So having training programs for parents are very critical as it relates to assisting the school district do what they're doing. I watched one of your former episodes, and I understand the superintendent has been trying out all types of things in terms of gift cards and all type of enticement dinners and feeding your people to try to get them in. And that's all good too. But I think we also need to add on to that the training and the outreach, and going to where they are.
We're
And
going to wait
sometimes
there.
that may mean that you have to be at the football game or at the talent show where the parents show up. You got to be right there with them. It's always been amazing to me how the parents can go all out for homecoming and for the game, and show up for little Johnny or Susie's concert, or the talent show, but they can't come to the board meeting or can't come to the parent teacher conference. And so my thing is, I go where they are and engage them and encourage them. And I employ everybody to do everything you can to do what we can to get them more involved. But I think that teaching them and giving them a voice and showing them how to use that is very critical to that piece. And also knocking down the barriers that prohibit them from doing what they would like to do. And a lot of it has to do with their job and the ability to be able to provide an income for their families, and doing some things flexible. So I think one of the things from the pandemic, the fact that now parents can now come on Zoom and use all these different platforms to have parent teacher conference, is a beautiful way that technology have introduced this as a way for mental technology and participation.
I agree with you. There was definitely a difference And when I was the CIO over at the Detroit Public Schools Community District, their board meetings were packed, right? And then working for coming from a charter school, literally we could do it in a small room or in a classroom because the auditorium wasn't needed because parents weren't showing up. And so I do think that there's a difference in how we address that. And Shannon, before I get your feedback, I just need to click and give a viewer and share what a viewer had just shared with us. She said Dr. Mason is correct because during the pandemic, families suffered for lack of food and shelter because folks became homeless, parents stressing out, and the children are shock absorbers for what is happening in the home. The state and the local community groups have to relocate their dollars that are meaningful for parents and their entire family. Hungry children can't learn, which can lead to depression and finally acting out. And we do get that a lot when kids come to school and they're hungry or they're distressed about them being homeless or cold and things like that. And I agree with you 100%, Judge. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Shannon, based on what Dr. Mason just shared with us, what's your thoughts based on what Trisha was saying in relation to the parents having a voice?
So I agree with both wholeheartedly. I would like to add this. Those parents that we look at as adults, and they are, were at one time students. And not all of them were great students. And people who do not have positive experiences with schools tend to stay away from schools, and unfortunately tend to reorient their thinking when they have to come into contact with schools. And oftentimes the relationship can be, we'll just call it combative, right? That having been said, I think schools have to extend themselves, as you said, Dr. Mason, in ways that we haven't. Go to where they are. Ensure that we're hearing them, that we're asking the right questions. But we also have to realize and remember that these parents, in many instances, were not too long ago our students.
That's so true.
I'm laughing as you say that, not that that's funny, but it is because those are often conversations I have to remember. There's, whoever you are as a child, you just grow into an adult, you mature into an adult, right?
Absolutely.
And you hopefully you picked up some things along the way that have increased your intellect and your ability to perform at a higher level. But sometimes it's not such the case, and you're still looking at what parents are doing, and you're saying to yourself, they're the adult, but are they the adult?
Well,
Are we still talking to a person who's not, mature enough to understand the impact? And the only thing I can say is I had a parent, and Thomas says I agree, with Shannon. I had a parent who literally had a job that maybe perhaps wasn't as suitable. They came to the school with their club outfit. She was a pole dancer. I understand that we called you and you were at work, but you couldn't grab, the jogging suit before you ran into the building with the stripper outfit on. That's my question.
so
Right.
I think, Burkett, that from an educator's perspective,
Mhm.
from a teacher's perspective, from a middle class perspective,
Mhm.
we are evaluating the actions and activity of folks that are oftentimes just trying to live from day to day. And I
Agreed.
think that and I didn't say lower your standard, but we got to support and really work
But
with
Shannon, she couldn't
work
grab
with
a trench
parents.
coat. A trench coat, we couldn't grab it.
No, that's all bad. No one should be,
She couldn't
no.
grab
But
it.
you pull the lady aside and say, nah.
I did. I took
Because
her to my office, and I
I've
and I
had
gave her
to,
a
I've
coat.
had
I
to be like,
did.
look, you can't wear that up here.
Right, exactly. That's what I said
Look,
to her.
look at my little 8th grade boys losing their minds, right? Like,
Mhm.
go home, put on something, and come back. Like, it's not that deep.
It's not the
So I'm with
exactly.
you, but I think you also have to have a relationship with someone in order to have that conversation. You can have the standard, and I don't think you waver from that, but it's all in how it's communicated.
I agree. I definitely agree. And Shannon, I did take her to the side, but I think security just let her in, Dr. Mason, because they just got a kick out of the whole thing. I don't even know how she got to even to my door at that point. I'm thinking this is a charter school. You let her get all the way to my office with this on? Like, what? How did this happen? But yeah, that was just very interesting. I agree with you. I think a lot of times we need to understand our level of understanding as far as expectations versus the person that our demographic that we're working with and the parents that we're trying to get in the door, right? So to Dr. Mason's point, if they're all showing up to, the concert, then I say right before the concert, you throw up a presentation about what's happening in the school before the concert starts. You know,
You got to meet them where they are. You have
tell
to.
me where they are. If you at the football game on that gigantic board where everybody's watching it, throw that presentation up, grab the mic. This is what's happening.
Absolutely.
You have to.
Or if you don't have that, handouts, just do your handouts and then say, okay, number one on there, this is what we talked about. We need your feet. You know what I mean? You hit it where they are. So, and that's just so to the point. So Tricia says, I saw the board meeting for the unfortunate situation that just happened at Oxford, as well as board meetings in suburban areas when wearing masks is the topic. The meetings were standing room only. A lot of teachers and students in the inner cities are facing threats of violence daily from our parent populations, which may speak to why they are not there. What's your thoughts on that?
Are we talking about parents wearing masks or?
We're talking about standing room only when you come to the rule in suburban, and when you get to us, it's just not happening. But not only that, the situation with the parents, the populations which speak out to why they are not there as it relates to facing threats of violence.
Well, there's many reasons, as I was saying before, as to why we don't have enough parent involvement. But I think that we should be proactive in terms of accommodating them and creating situations that would allow them to be more involved. And I think that the fact that I've seen a major increase of parent involvement through the Zoom format or Microsoft Team in terms of allowing parents to participate in IEPs. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas before you had a lot of absences and you were, scrambling all throughout the year trying to get that parent up there to talk about the goals and the objectives. So I think that the technology platform has helped us to try to deal with that particular situation. Also, when it comes to a parent being at work, and if there is a meeting in terms of dealing with the parent-teacher association, the fact that you now can give those parents an option to maybe utilize their lunch break if they want to be actively involved, and they can Zoom in on a meeting there. The fact that if you're having parent-teacher conference, if it's face-to-face, you can still now have platforms for those who make an appointment through the Zoom platform if they can't be there face-to-face. So there's a variety of different things that we've learned from the pandemic as how that can assist us in making the school community a better place for all.
I agree with that 100%. There's definitely some things we can do. Shannon, what's your thoughts?
No, we're all on the same page there.
100%. We're all on the same space, 100%.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Mason, Sheila says hello. Hi, Aunt Sheila. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Aunt Sheila.
Okay, so Thomas K says, the disdain for school is one of the generational cursors, and we have to build relationships with our parents in order to break the curse. That is exactly what Dr. Mason is saying. She's saying, look, we need to get in there. If they're coming for football, we got to go to football. They're coming for cheerleading, go to cheerleading. We need to go where they are and hand out handouts. We need to just put on a TV screen. Just do whatever you need to do to get these people's attention and say, hey, we need you.
And we need to reach out proactively on a positive level as well.
Right, and not negative all the time. Like, just say we need you. Let me tell you something. I tell people, when somebody says they need you, oh my gosh, that's just like so awesome to feel needed. Just tell them.
Or your kid did something awesome in school today. I just want to call you and let you know what an amazing child you have.
You know what? I just need to do a shout out. And so, Aunt Sheila says amen to that. Like, she totally agrees with the approach of just going where we need to go. So, Tricia said, listen, parents are making threats. That's why they are not at the board meetings advocating for change. what parents, I mean, I don't understand why parents are making threats to anybody. And I don't even know, I mean, Dr. Mason, when you look at it from your perspective, from a healthcare, like a mental health, how can we approach that situation so that we can kind of resolve some of this combativeness between parents and teachers and students, because it does seem to be a growing thing as we continue to work in this hybrid situation with education.
I think as a board member, one of the things is very important to listen to what your parents are saying, whether they're irate or angry or making threats. Is having some of those resources available that you can connect them with to let them know they're being heard in terms of what they're saying. When you talk about the Oxford incident and the mass shooting that happened there, where we lost a lot of children, and a lot of children were traumatized as a result. One of the things that we did in the Detroit Public Schools, I was a part of a mass shooting incident at Henry Ford High School. And so, as a result of that, what we did was have the resources right there in the school. We had Black Family Development with their counselors there for a whole entire year after the incident. We partnered with Spalding's for Children, who
Wow.
were there to provide
Yeah.
daycare services for the parents, and many of the parents were students, in terms of helping them to deal with their life challenges, but dealing with the trauma. And so knowing where to go in your school community, in the building, is very, very important. We also had additional resources in terms of dealing with how do you manage conflict and resolution, and having that training for the students as a part of the recovery that we went through when we lost several of our students, and several of our students were injured. That was in 2009. So as a school board meeting, basically, if I have my mental health social worker that's there at the board meeting,
Mhm.
to listen to the parent and talk with them if they need to express themselves some more, having those people available there is one way to deal with some of that. Yes.
And so in a lot of these situations, and I don't understand if you guys experience this in New York, but it gets a little rowdy sometimes when you have these combative parents. And I know at DPSCD and DPS there was security police, like actual police, Detroit police, who would just take them and escort them out. In that type of situation, Trisha, I'm going to tell you, it's a catch-22. I think one, you need to try to work with those parents, because again, they're like children. There's a reason why they're acting out. You need to find out why. Why are they so
Yes.
angry and so combative? So if there's a way that you can reach out to them or have someone reach out to them, maybe an external party, a third party, a social worker, someone to try to assist and find out what the issues are. Maybe you all can set up a virtual meeting with them and speak with them privately about what their concerns are and why they're so combative, to try to resolve their issues. That way you can kind of come together with some understanding, reduce some of that layering that you guys have, and then that way your board meetings can be more constructive and not so minute on people feeling threatened, and you would get the participation you need. Shannon, what's your thoughts?
So in New York, they have opportunities within each of the boroughs to, and parents come out, and it's not necessarily a board situation, but these are community meetings where the superintendent, the chancellor, they all engage parents around what some of the issues and concerns are. I've been to a number of those meetings in every borough, and I've never seen the violence. However, um, I do think having the opportunity to be heard is imperative, and building that in before you get to the point where you have a public meeting is absolutely important. And an effective practice that any superintendent or principal could put in place is really to have a parent council, and to have just a group that really that they hear and are heard from on a regular basis, to really get the pulse of what's going on within the community, but also to really hear what the concerns are.
I like that. It's really changed. It goes back to what Dr. Mason's saying, is just changing the infrastructure of how we look at school versus yesterday versus today. We've got to start making some changes and putting some things in place in order for that to be successful. So I want to thank my guests for coming. I'm going to say it's just so much fun. Shannon, you know, you and I, we talk all the time and we have fun. But Dr. Mason, to have you on, I'm just going to say it's like royalty.
Dr. Mason.
I just want to say, and not because you're family. See, the thing is, Shannon, you probably don't know I have a lot of family doing a lot of different things. But the thing is, I never, ever have ever pulled a family to help support my career and what I do. In our family, you earn your own chops, right? You do what you got to do. And I'm going to say that it's been commendable that I've been able to watch her grow, because I was way, 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 way behind her coming up through education. But I was always so proud to be like, you know what? That's family right there. Oh my gosh. That's like some rock star. So I'm telling you, I'm really excited to have you on. And of course, you're always welcome to come back. This is a platform that if you feel at any point in time you want to have an educators roundtable focused on any of your hot topics, please feel free to reach out. Our platform is heard all the way to Ghana. So we do a lot of great things, and I'm so grateful that my co-host, and I absolutely love Shannon. This has been a rock star year launching this podcast. And those of whom don't know, actually do something outside of the podcast, which is totally related to IT consulting. But because I do a lot of things with education and I am a former educator, I thought it was important to do this. So Dr. Mason, thank you so much for coming on. We definitely appreciate you joining us here at Educators Roundtable, and feel free to come back anytime.
Thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you, Shannon.
Very good meeting
Thank you to the guests who's been listening or watching. I look forward to coming on board again. And I'd like to say happy holidays to everyone.
Okay, and Tricia said, great show. Thanks for the platform. God bless you, Christine, and your guests. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And as always, here at Educators Roundtable, our purpose for this platform is to provide educators with an opportunity to share on hot topics in education. Unless we speak out together and begin to make change, we're not going to see change. Think about what Dr. Mason said. We really need to change the infrastructure of how we do education. And until we start taking a closer look at the tools and resources and what's really needed in order to set us apart from what it is that we do now to excel our students, that's our focus. Education should be focused on students and student needs. Look at what they do in New York, all the different resources and tools they offer, and they're still face-to-face. Texas is doing the same thing. But then a lot of our school districts are hybrid, and then we're still missing out on something that the students truly need. She pinpointed and said, social emotional is the key. When you have a kid that's hungry, if you have a kid that doesn't have any lights, if you have a kid that misses their friend, how are they supposed to focus on what it is that they're doing? The loss that we've had over the past couple years due to the pandemic has impacted all of us. So we really need to start taking a closer look. So in 2022, Educators Roundtable is coming back, and we're coming back with a bang. We're coming back with a brand new platform and what we're doing, and we're going to be offering more resources online and more support from all over the world. So I thank you now for staying tuned to us. And if you missed any of our other podcasts, you can always watch us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So again, thank you so much for joining us here at Educators Roundtable, and I'll see you guys in 2022.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day.